Good afternoon. We'll start our hike in just a minute. This is the Maynard Tree Corps virtual Tree Blitz ID hike. We'll get started in just a couple minutes, so while people are hooking up and getting settled down and everything. And today we're going to start off where we ended last time, pretty close to that position. And today we don't have Brett Matheson, unfortunately, doing the filmography here. So it's going to be me and then my son, who you'll see in a little bit. And so I think I'll apologize for potential motion sickness today. We'll do the best we can with what we are able to do. We'll just wait another minute and scan the scenes. Let me turn this around. Okay. So this is the area over there that we finished. Sort of finished. And this is where we're going. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to end up going up that slope a little bit. There's a really pretty fascinating piece of woods over there. Okay. I think maybe we should get started. So there's my son Alon. He's going to do the introduction. Yeah, you can speak.
Hi.
Hi. And he'll do the initial filming for the introduction. Okay. All right. So it's Friday, March 27th. My name is Neil Pederson. I'm a forest ecologist who studies
At the Harvard Forest.
Alon, thank you. But today I'm just representing as a member of the Maynard Tree Corps, whose mission is to grow and preserve the canopy of Maynard, to promote street trees and anything that comes along with that. We've started doing these virtual hikes. We were going to do one last week, but we got the virus got us. Anyways, so it's just a virtual hike from now. We're going to do a series of these so we can learn about the forest. We started at the other end of this trail, and today the goal today is to look at some more trees, to learn how to identify trees in the winter without leaves, and then look for signs of spring. And so some of the characteristics that we're going to use to identify trees are not going to be the botanical kind, exactly like all the specific characteristics. More of what are some of the simpler ones that can get us down to species rather quickly. And before we get going, I want to say that on our hike last week we got 8 species, which was pretty good, and I imagine we might beat that today. I set my timer for 1:30, so when that goes off, we'll stop. Okay. Thanks, Alon.
You're welcome.
Okay. So this is where we ended up last week. What you're looking at is a fairly young red maple floodplain swamp forest. There was ash, beech, and a handful of other species in there. We saw a red oak and white pine. Last week I called one of the trees, I was deciding, first I called it white oak, then I started hedging towards swamp white oak, and I think I'm going to put it in the swamp white oak category. They're hard to split out sometimes, and they're not a common tree, but there are a lot of them in eastern Massachusetts, more than I'm expecting. And here's where we're going. You can see there's fewer trees. The trees are generally larger. And so there's different land use histories. And I wanted to talk about how initially I was saying, oh, this is a swamp. I thought maybe it was some pasture or something 30, 40 years ago or so. And the different changes in elevation. This is a slightly wetter area over here compared to where we're going. And I thought that might be a good indication of how or why the land was used, but here's some other indications. Here's a ditch right here. It's kind of hard to see. So the people that were working this land created a little ditch to help create a little better drainage. And then right here, of course, you can see a stone wall. And there are books on stone walls of New England and what they represent. We won't get into that too much here. And then as we were setting up and getting ready, I noticed this down here, different types of barbed wire here. Here's a newer barbed wire. And this looks like fairly old barbed wire right here. I'm not a barbed wire expert, but definitely this is some type of old pasture. So let's get going into the new upland part. It's just a few inches higher in elevation, and certainly land use makes a difference in the types of trees that are here. So it's a combination of what the soils are like and also how the land was used. But this is a very different forest than what we saw over there. We've walked past a few of the American beech that we introduced you to last week. I'm going to scan this tree right here. This is a white ash. We looked at a white ash last week. And if you look up high, there aren't many twigs in the tree to the center of your screen. There aren't many twigs in the canopy compared to the trees that are right next to it. And that's one of the best ways for me to identify ash. A few stout twigs compared to other species. You can see the beech to the right has many more finer twigs in the canopy. But when we scan back down to this white ash, you can see it has diamond-shaped interlaced bark. And it's not perfectly diamonds, but it's kind of got that hint to it, and that's one good introductory characteristic of that tree. This tree right here is a sugar maple. Hold on, can you write that down? Sugar maple is a sugar maple, and this doesn't really have great classic traits that I would like to teach you right now to identify sugar maple. I can identify it as a sugar maple because I've been looking at it for such a long time, but here's one trait right here that I will show. This root that's coming out right here, it reminds me of light brown sugar. I use a lot of food analogies. That's just how I do it. This is a light tan color, and that is a common color of sugar maple bark. We'll see some better examples up ahead. Okay. We showed you this species last week, red oak, but I want to show you this individual because this is what I think of when I think of red oaks. This is a very large individual, but when you go up higher, you see those ski slopes now that are reflecting the sunlight coming down the bark. Let's see if I can do this. Right there. That's fun. That is the identifying trait of red oak bark. The ski slopes, like on the sides of a mountaintop. Hey, Alon, can you come stand in front of this tree? During my dissertation, I studied in front of this big tree. For my dissertation, I studied about 400 red oak across New York State and New England. You can see that's a pretty large tree. And what I learned about red oak during my dissertation is it's just like a beast. It's almost like an animal. It's a very fast-growing tree. Once it gets into canopy position, it just grows and grows and grows and grows. Very fast. So now I'm going to start in front of this tree right here that Alon is now sitting in front of. This is a hard tree to describe, to be honest. I'm going to get to the sun side. This is black gum. If you're from up north, down south it's called black tupelo. If you're from Rhode Island, you might call it pepper ridge. Has a lot of common names, and this is sylvatica. And this is a species. When I learned a lot of species as an undergraduate up in the Adirondacks, we had a Professor George. He would say something like, oh, it has distinctive gray bark and distinctive green leaves, which meant nothing to us. And I almost want to say that for this species because it really doesn't have a lot of jump out characteristics that you can say, oh, that's a black gum. It took me a while to learn this species because basically what happened is we'd come to a tree like this, we'd go down a list of about 12, 15 species that we thought it was, and then we'd go, Oh, it's black gum. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at black gum. And so the best traits for this one is it does have sort of a blocky ridge and furrow bark, but this is a young tree, so that's not really characteristic of older trees. This is the oldest documented deciduous species in temperate North America. It lives at least 679 years old. There's 500-year-old ones all over the place in the Northeast. I'm trying to zoom in. The best trait to identify this species is, if you can see, this is going to be hard. We'll see other examples up ahead. But a lot of the twigs, the finer twigs, are coming off the branches at 90-degree angles. The perfect black gum, black tupelo canopy will have 90-degree branching of its fine twigs off the larger twigs. And for those of us who remember, they look like TV antennas. So TV antennas is the best way to identify this species, but this is a hard one. You just have to take a long time to learn it. Just takes a lot of experience. I would say if you ever get to see the buds of that species, they look like dirty fingernails. So it has scales over the buds after the buds are formed, and it looks like someone's dirty fingernails. And that's the best way to identify it, honestly. And there are some other traits. It's one of the first trees to turn its leaves red in the fall. And but boy, there's not many distinguishing characteristics. I just want to show you this beautiful beech tree. It looks like it's starting to get beech bark disease. The bark is awfully rough looking. And I just wanted to show you the Assabet River. This is a really wonderful habitat. Okay, so let's go see some more species. I'm gonna zoom back out somehow.
Yeah.
What? Okay. Thanks, bud. It's a lovely day. I wish you could be out here. There are people who are enjoying the lovely weather.
We got a stream stopper.
And they're playing in the stream, which we would. Okay, this species right here. Yeah, this is, well, there has a lot of names for this one. In New England, they call it blue beech. I really like that name for it. Some people call it ironwood. Another name for it is musclewood. I don't see how they come up with that name. If someone can explain it to me. It's very smooth bark. It has these smooth ridges and furrows. This is a fairly large one right here. And one thing I've noticed in looking at this, I haven't lived with too many of these on a day-to-day basis. It's still holding on to its leaves like the beech does and like oaks do. So Alon, this is a new species. You can write it down. Musclewood. You can write down musclewood.
I wrote down blue beech.
Blue beech. I like that name too. And I'm running over to this one right here because this is one of the biggest musclewoods I've seen in this area. Here's my hand on it. They don't get too much bigger than this. They do get bigger than it, of course, especially down in the Smokies, but they don't get much bigger than that. It's musclewood. Come on, let's go. We're gonna go hit another. So now we're going, here's the stream that drains down into the Assabet River, and now we're firmly coming up into the uplands, and we're going to spend a little bit of time here because this is a great place to learn our oaks. You can see many oak species right here. We're not going to look at each individual tree here, but I do want to come to this tree right here. This is one of my favorite trees in this part of the forest. This is a white oak. We talked about white oak a little bit, but I'm going to reintroduce it again today. It has very, very white bark for an oak. This individual is growing very slowly. It's just starting to get into the canopy. If you look up high, you can there's the canopy right there of this tree, and it's going up and it's going over, and it's finally overtopping some trees just below it, and it's finally reaching some sunlight. And so this tree has been struggling to survive in the understory. It's probably the same age as the biggest trees here. It's growing much slower, and so it has much smoother bark. So this is what old or slow growing white oak bark looks like. You won't see it in your textbooks or any hold on, try not to lean on me. So you can see very smooth bark right here. This is white oak. And then this very smooth bark right here is really, when I'm out looking for 300 and 400-year-old white oak, I look for trees that have bark like this. And then this shape of this tree, it's very sinuous. As you go up, you could see it shifts in one direction to another. There's a real kink in it right there, and then it's shifting over to the other. This is a suppressed white oak, and I want to show you now what a faster growing white oak bark looks like. So here, this large tree right here, all 3 stems that you see, the 3 main stems you see in this picture are white oak. This bark right here is what I think of as classic white oak bark. It's flaky. It can get a little peely sometimes, and if up on some of the upper branches up here, you could see that the bark peels off on the side, and so it creates these long flaps of bark. I don't know what else to call it, but it's a really flaky bark, and that's what you'll see in your books on how to identify white oak. That's what the bark is often pictured, but this is what middle-aged, 80, 100-year-old white oak bark right here. And then this individual, probably the same age, and you can see the difference now, how smooth that white oak bark is here compared to this. And I think that difference in bark structure is simply growth rates. This one's in the understory. This is a dominant white oak tree, doing very well with a large canopy. Right there. Now, here's another white oak. Yeah, let's go up this way. There's a lot of beech mixed in here. There's a nice looking beech tree. Here's another tree to add to our list. Hold on, this is black oak. And so this is the twin, I would say, of red oak. And when we pan up this individual, this is a fairly large black oak. There aren't any big ski slope tracks like you see in the red oak. That's backlit, so that's really hard to see. This tree in the center, do you see the very black bark? Black cherry has that color bark. This is black oak, very black compared to white oak. And if you look on those upper branches, that's better lit. Brent, we need you here today. There aren't many of the ski slopes that you see on the red oak, so this is black oak. Now, I don't know much about black oak. We know that it lives maybe 200, 300 years old, maybe. We do know it grows on richer soils, but other than that, we don't know much about it. We do find them, they seem to be on old fields, but really, to me, they're an indicator of soil quality. So when you see black oaks in the forest, it tends to suggest the soils are a little richer. There's a little more nutrients. Maybe there's some more calcium in the soil. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. So a little richer soil. But you can see this has blocks, these small blocks of bark here, 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 here. That, when you see an oak tree with blocky bark like that up here in the northeastern United States, your guess is it's a black oak. That's the best guess. Now we could dig below the bark and we could pull out some, sorry, I'm going too fast. I hope no one's getting seasick. Sorry about that. We could dig below the bark of these black oaks, and there's a slightly yellow or orange pulp. And when you taste it, it tastes very bitter. It's one of the more bitter flavors if you're a bitter taster, because some people I know can't taste it and they don't believe that that's a characteristic of it. Sorry, I'm trying to zoom this back out right now and it's not behaving. There we go. Some people don't taste that bitter taste. And if you remember from your high school classes or college classes where they had you try different tastings of these pieces of paper, and some people could taste things and other people can't. That's what I think is happening with some of these black oaks. Some people can taste it and some people cannot. This is a white oak. It has blocky bark, like I just told you black oak does. But I want to show you these bald patches. And so these bald patches are a sign of age or growth rates. And in this case, this is a small individual suppressed. So I think these bald patches represent a slower growing tree. But in general, the bark is lighter in color. We'll zoom over here and you see that twin tree up there. That's black oak. The bark is much darker on black oak than white oak. Sometimes I don't know how they come up with these names, but we have to live with it. We have red maples in the uplands in this forest. So this forest there's a beech right there, lovely color with the old leaves still hanging on. It looked like over the last couple days the leaves started to curl. And I don't know if that's a signal of anything, and if anyone knows that, please let me know. I'm going to show you this tree. Yeah, this is a red maple. This is a very large red maple, and it's going to be hard to see, but we'll try to do it. The buds this time of year is a good way to identify the species. There are buds in the canopy of that tree. And that's how you identify them this time of year. The bark is rather strippy, I guess you'd say. All right, I'm gonna zoom out again. Sorry, hope no one's getting seasick again. There we go. Okay. But that's a large red maple, and that bark looks very different than the red maple that we showed you last week. But red maple can be a really difficult species to identify because it has such great variability in its bark. When I started to approach that tree, I started to think that maybe it was an elm, to be honest. So it had some funny traits with it. But it was a red maple. And so red maple is a tree that has many different characteristics, and I shouldn't speak for you, I can be fooled by it quite a bit. I still do, but you can see up in the canopy here against the blue sky, you can see its red flowers right now. It's in full bloom. A few years ago, we had such a good bloom of the red maple that it almost, when the seeds came out, they just seeded so heavily that year that it almost looked like fall. It was an amazing color along Route 2. Here's a black oak again. There are fewer species up here than I had guessed. And this is, we'll start here, but we're making our way towards sugar maple. This is sugar maple, this individual right here. And you can see it doesn't have the strippy bark that red maple does. There's something rough about this bark. It can be really smooth, but there's a roughness in younger, slightly faster growing sugar maple bark that I'm gonna sound like my old professor, that's very distinctive. So get a good look at this. The texture of this bark is what tips me off to being a sugar maple. I don't see any of the light tan color, but I know there's an individual up here we'll go find. We're gonna look at this tree again, or this species. This tree right here is white ash, and I stopped to pause on it because as we pan up on this tree, you'll see that it splits. I know we're backlit, so let me turn around. You see how this individual right here, the trunk is split and now it's 2 and then 3 limb trunks going up. That's a really good identifying trait of white ash. Quite often they'll grow up 20 or 30 feet and then they'll split into 2 trunks. And that's another trait you can use. I want to show you another tree we've already seen. But this has that better characteristic of black cherry, the flaky burnt potato chip bark that my old professor Don Leopold used to call it. This is a dead one again. They're one of the first trees to come in after a disturbance. They're one of the first trees to die of the major tree species, but you can see the blackness of the bark and this real flaky, this is black cherry. Very flaky bark. Burnt potato chips or burnt cornflakes, whatever you want. Now, if you are unsure with an individual smaller tree, if you scratch the bark and sniff underneath it and you smell something like burnt almonds, really bitter, that's black cherry. Now, this is one of the finer sugar maples in this stand, so we're going to concentrate now on sugar maple the rest of this, pretty much the rest of this video. This is starting to get into slightly faster growing, slightly older sugar maple bark. It has peels of bark similar to white oak that so they peel off this way, they peel to the side, so you have these long strips of bark right here, and they peel from side to side. Red maple peels this way from the bottom part of the strip up, and it sometimes can curl up so much on red maple that it can look like a shagbark hickory. But this one peels side to side. So this is a very large, dominant, fast-growing for the species sugar maple, and this is this is some of the bark that you'll see in your ID books. How you doing? People are enjoying the woods. Don't forget to check for ticks, everyone. Enjoy the woods, but the ticks are out. I'm trying to find one more sugar maple. Here's our another black cherry tree right here. It has a split trunk right there and it's really dominating this part of the forest. It's not one that you would turn into furniture. It's not very straight, but it's a beautiful tree nonetheless. And this is the tree I want to end on. This sugar maple, a young individual, smoother bark. It has some of the strips flaking to the side. Right there. And this is, I wanted to show you this tree because this is really a beautiful sugar maple from a forester's perspective. Straight, clean bole. Do you see how there's a light tannish color in the bark?
What tree is that?
That's a sugar maple again. That is one way I distinguish sugar maple from red maple. I showed you the light brown sugar bark on that first individual, but overall the color of this bark has a slight tan gray color to it, and I think of red maple has more of a red maple has more of a blue-gray sort of tone to it, I guess. So this is a nice sugar maple stand of sugar maples right here. And I wanted to stop here because now we've seen black oak, sugar maple, white ash. When you see those individuals together, that tells you that the soil underneath your feet is fairly fertile. Sugar maple, and here's 3 lovely ones right here. 1, 2, 3. And when you see sugar maple, black oak, white ash, in the same forest like we do here, you're standing on richer soils. Sugar maple is also known as a calciphile. So what that basically means is it's more dependent on calcium than other species. It can actually pump some of the calcium up from deep soils and bring it to the surface for utilization. And it's one reason why this species is in decline in the Northeast. Decades of acid rain have depleted the soils of calcium and other cations or base positive ions in the soil, and they've made the soils poor, and that's really hurt sugar maple.
Dad,
Yes?
we finish this.
I'm being asked to finish this. Our alarm just went off a minute ago, so we're going to finish this now. And today we saw musclewood, sugar maple, white oak, black oak, red gum as new species. And there should be a black gum in there too. So I'll tally that up and I'll put them in the comments below this video. If you have any questions, please drop your questions in there. I'll answer them as I am able to. Thanks. Get outside. Enjoy the day. Wish you could be here. Watch for ticks. Enjoy the day. Bye.
Dad, can I press finish?
Say bye.